Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm right after the lunch, so I will try to be very dynamic. I was told that you can't really wear a tie in San Francisco, so I was very hesitant this morning, and I want to thank everybody in the room with a tie for your support, and I feel a bit less lonely. So thanks for doing it, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Rina, for the introduction. So of course, the goal of today is to set the stage for semantic enrichment, right? So I will try really to cover a few different topics. So I put together this agenda together with Rina, and first to set the stage and really to define what we are talking about. I will try to answer this question: what is semantic content enrichment? From a functional and a technical standpoint. So that's really the part one of my talk, and then I'll try to explain how to get there, right? So I call this your roadmap to semantics. It's a bit ambitious, but the idea, of course, is to define where you want to go, so which type of features you want to implement, which features, and those features, of course, are semantically enabled, which techniques you can use to deploy those features to the vehicles to get there, and then, of course, how do you define and how you stage your journey towards the realization of those features. And then, of course, I've been asked to show some use cases, so I'll do, I think I selected 3 or 4 use cases, which it's going to be fairly short, and it's only an introduction to the use cases that Jerry from IEEE and Kathleen from Gannett will develop. And as Rina said, we think it's very interesting to have Jerry and Kathleen, because you'll have the scholarly publishing perspective, and we'll try to open the perspective a little bit with a leading media organization like Gannett. Ready? All right, let's do it. So first, I'll try to define really the notion of semantic enrichment. So this is a very small sentence here. It could be taken from a medical journal. So we report somebody with a side effect apparently induced by a drug with a specific dosage, right? So the first process that the semantic enrichment does is the identification of the terms. So we all do it, right? When we read, we do it in a very quick way. Some of us do it in different languages, and of course we need to understand the terms and the grammar to derive the meaning. It's exactly the same principle for the system. First the terms. So the tokenization is really finding all the terms in a sentence, tokenization, and then you have the part of speech tagging, which is assigning a syntactic role to the term itself. Okay, is this a verb, a subject? Is this a numerical value? Is this a unit, etc.? And once you have that, you can derive entities. So entities is really the first layer where you have some extracted knowledge. I would say that the first base treatment is really the linguistic analysis. The extraction of entities is really where you start to extract knowledge from the unstructured content itself. So in this case, the system groups words together, terms, non-phrases, to find entities like, in this specific example, a patient, a symptom, a drug name, and then something which looks like the dosage information for this drug. Okay. And where really it gets semantic, now, of course, this type of techniques a few years ago were called natural language processing. So now it's much more trendy to call this semantic enrichment. But I would say, really to qualify semantics, the semantic part where you start to derive the meaning is really at the third level, when you start to find a relationship between the entities. So that's where you have, what is technically called a semantic triple. You have a subject, you have an object, you have a predicate. That's why you can start feeding some triple store, right? Because you have this RDF statement. So I think it's very linguistic in the base layer, and it's very semantic on the upper layer. And of course, it's semantic in the sense that you have roles and attributes. So we understand in this specific example that we have an adverse event, an adverse effect. The drug is not trying to cure a specific condition; it's causing it. So the analysis of the verb here can trigger this knowledge, and we can fairly easily relate the 52 to the age of the patient and the 8.6 to the dosage of the drug itself. So that's an example of the constitution of a triple store of a semantic extraction based on unstructured content. Took me half of the flight from New York to build this slide, so I have more. So then let's look at it from a document perspective, right? So I mean, I've shown you what's under the hood, and this is really how you publishers, I mean, are thinking of this technology. What we extract is metadata. So of course, I mean, there is a talk tomorrow about metadata and the essentials about metadata. I will speak of the semantic metadata. We need to define, of course, and draw a line between the semantic metadata, which are extracted by a semantic engine, and the administrative or the metadata that any document carries. Those, of course, are the semantic metadata. So this process that we've seen on a specific sentence can be applied at the document level, and then, of course, at the corpus level, to extract a list of symptoms, diseases, drugs, dosage information for the drugs, patient information, people, etc. And of course the topics. So in this case, I mean, the key nugget of knowledge from this article is a specific side effect. So that's at the document level. Most of us call this, so it really depends on the background, right? Automated indexing, tagging, enrichment, addition of metadata. It's all the same thing, but I think the indexing or the tagging at this stage are the right words. The enrichment, I think, is one step further, and I will show you. So once you have the tags, I mean, once you know which pieces of information are important in the content, of course, you can leverage those pieces of information and their position in the document to insert knowledge, to augment the knowledge from this specific article with additional knowledge. So in this case, I mean, a typical example when you have a drug, I guess would be a lookup in a database like a drug bank. So this is, I mean, it's limitless here. You can do lookup on your own specific knowledge bases if you have structured product and content product. That's where the linked data phenomenon takes all its power, of course, because you can link to other publishers' content, you can link to other database of knowledge, and you can grab this knowledge and insert it in the document. Or, if you think of it as a web feature, when a reader will mouse over the specific entity, he will have a pop-up window with additional knowledge to enrich his navigation on the website or on the product. You can link people to LinkedIn profile. You can link organization to database of organization. You can resolve acronym. You can link gene to interest gene. I mean, this is very domain dependent, of course. I mean, you need to think of what interesting information you have outside of your organization and inside as well to promote this knowledge and to enrich the navigation. So that's really the enrichment. So if you look at it from start to finish, Word document, that's where we saw the different analysis that a semantic engine does on the content. Then you have the annotation, finding the tags and locating the tags with their coordinates on the content. Then you augment, potentially, the content with this external knowledge or internal knowledge. So that's the content enrichment itself. And then linking, of course, because once you have those tags, you can use the tags to compare this specific document to other documents and to suggest more content to read to the user. So the linking is I would say it's an immediate benefit of the tagging itself. When we say linking, I'd like to maybe explain two different things here. The first one is really linking to similar content. So you compare the fingerprint of any given article or book chapter to the fingerprint of other articles or book chapter or news article in the case of Gannett. And so that's really, suggesting more like this content. So it's the content recommendation type of feature. Or you can link on a specific entity. In this case, you could use, in the example that I had, you can use, for example, the drug to find all the other clinical reports on this specific drug. Or you can use the side effect, alopecia, to find all the other articles or book chapters on, which are inducing this specific disease. So one is more similar content, and the other one is related content. It's a small, there is a subtle difference, but usually when we say linking, it's either to related content or to similar content. And last but not least, and we see, of course, more and more of this, and it's not usually what publishers or news organizations do first, but it could be an end goal. It's the analytics, right? Because once you have this rich metadata, you can do a lot of different very powerful analytics, navigation. You can give to your user some graph to navigate in your knowledge. You can store the extraction in triple store, and then you can plug some very powerful analytical tools on top of the triple store. So there are a lot of things you can do once you have the metadata. And I would say that here you're very close to the content. And of course, the higher you go, the more far away from the content you are. We take question at the end. So far, so good? All right, thanks. So part 2 is really the roadmap to semantics. So here I decided to separate, to work on 3 things. First, the goals. So I analyze the needs that we heard from our customers, from publishers in many different domains, and I will try to separate those goals in some key areas of value. The different techniques that you can use to achieve the goals. Of course, there is a mapping exercise to be done here. And then finally, how do you get the project organized, and how do you stage the journey to achieve the goals? So number 1, the 3 key areas of value. So I think the first one really is the blue part here. It's more compelling content. So this is related to your existing products or to your existing websites, and it's really those features which will enhance those products. Okay. So I selected. It's the list is not a finite list, of course, and I would be very happy to discuss with you to augment the list, because this is really work in progress. But of course, SEO is what we hear a lot, especially from magazine publisher and news organization. Like Gannett, SEO is always in their mind when they start to do some tagging. So you use some tags to expose to the readers for better search, better navigation, but you also have a lot of tags that nobody sees except Google and Bing to really promote the content with the search engine. SEO is a very vast topic. I won't spend much time on that, but it could deserve a whole afternoon on SEO. But just keep in mind at this stage that the semantic tags that you derive from the content can give you better exposure in terms of search engine optimization. Faceted search, of course. If you have tags, right, usually you want to use them to help your user drill down and find a more reduced subset of documents. Linking, as we've seen already. Content recommendation, which is somehow related to the linking itself. Based on the semantic fingerprint of each document, you can suggest more content to the reader. So that's, the end goal, of course, is to augment the consumption of content by the customers. Personalization, I think, is key. We see a lot of products which previously were very broad and shallow, and we see a lot of publishers moving to more targeted products, more targeted collections of documents. All those publishers need more tagging, so that's very essential. You can refine at the user level. You can refine for a specific community of users, for specific constituents in your societies. So building collections of documents for a specific user or for a specific subset of user is key. Of course, you want to do this on the fly, right? If you start involving editorial to do the personalization itself, it won't be scalable. So the idea is to involve editorial for the tagging, of course, but then define personalization rules. And finally, analytics. How do you sell this internally, right? To a CFO, to a CEO, to a publisher? Because as you know, they like to see metrics and the return on investment. So this one is fairly easy because increased usage, of course, is derived by the faceted search and the fact that the websites have a better stickiness. Lower cost per download, which is usually an interesting metrics to look at. Customer satisfaction and retention. Increase transaction revenue, if the goal is to sell books by the chapters or articles. If you suggest and promote more content, obviously you'll have a better chance to do that. One which I think is fairly new, but the author preference. We see a lot of authors. They have a choice, right? And they have a choice between different journals, and of course, They can also take into consideration when they make a decision that if this journal is successful as a good website and some interesting feature, including some analytics, this could be part of the decision-making process as well. So the second area of value is more related to new product, right? New product that you can build based on the semantic tagging. So I tried to list, at least 4, but I'm sure there are a few missing. Topic pages is always a big one. This idea to take a thin slice of the content and to repurpose this into a specific topic page, which is heavily dependent on the tagging. Of course, that's always a good one. Knowledge bases. If we go back to what we've seen previously, once you have those triples, which you can extract in RDF from the content, then you can feed knowledge bases. So in this case, you have different products, right? This is quite far away from the content itself, but you use the content to have a data-driven product. So it's from text-driven product or content-driven product to data-driven product. So this is a big trend as well that we see. API-driven content delivery. This one I think is huge, potentially. I think it was a little bit futuristic a few years ago, but I see it happening. Not always in the medical field, yeah. For surgeon, for example, when they look at a specific application, you want to deliver, the answer to the question that they ask when they do a specific procedure. I think the Bloomberg example is a good one. The traders, they are very busy. They're always in a rush. They don't read the newspaper. They don't go to a website to check the news. They are really plugged to their Bloomberg terminal. Why is Bloomberg so involved in generating content? Because they feed this population of traders and brokers with relevant content when they look up a specific stock quote. So that's really how the Bloomberg content is processed, much more than on the website itself. So we see more and more examples where the content is not delivered on a specific product, but in a workflow and directly within the customer environment, right? Within its workflow. So that's the delivery of information in context. From a technical standpoint, it's API-driven or web service-driven content delivery. So this is very exciting because here, I see a few of you are starting to think of different options here. This is potentially limitless. It's very dependent, of course, on your readers. You need to adapt this strategy to what they use in terms of tools. So it requires a good understanding of what they use in their daily professional life. But that's very interesting. And semantic advertising, not all scholarly or scientific publishers have an advertising component to it, but quite a few. And of course, for companies like Gannett, that's a big part of the game. If you can have more targeted ads, based on the keywords that each ads have, and matching this keyword to the semantic fingerprint of the content, of course, the relevance of the ad will be better, the click-through will be better, and the values of the ad will be much better as well. So keep that in mind. The semantic advertising, or I don't know, maybe targeted advertising is a good word for it as well. That's always a good benefit of the tagging itself. So those are things that you couldn't do before, right? The blue part I think is enhancement. The red part are the new breakthrough things. So this one, how do you set it? Increase return on assets, right? Because you don't really generate new content. You leverage the content to generate more products, and a new revenue stream for the society, the publisher, or the media company. The other one, which is really maybe more how you set it to a CFO than to a CEO, it's the cost savings. In some cases, the automated indexing, the automated semantic enrichment, replaces a manual process. So it's very easy to measure. Those manual indexing processes sometimes are in-house, and they apply in many cases. You need a subject matter expert, right, to do it because it's very specific content. In some other cases, they are outsourced, less expensive, more issues on quality in some cases, and of course the time to market is not great. So for the new content, if you have to have a team of indexers, or if you have to outsource the tagging of new content regularly, that's fine. But think of it if you do a backfile indexing. If you want to enrich your backfile, 1 million, 6 million documents, this doesn't work anymore. So when the size is of the content set is big, that's where the automation really takes a lot of space. We see cases where the content flow is validated by human, so it's validated by the editorial, and at the same time, when the publisher do the backfile indexing, this is fully automated as well. So you have different options. I mean, not everything needs to be fully automated. And then, of course, where it gets really interesting is that when the editors are validating or not validating the tags, or where they are changing the tags, the system has some machine learning component to it, and we learn and we leverage this knowledge from the curation to be better at the tagging system itself. So this is, I mean, there is here a virtuous cycle between the manual curation and the tagging itself. So I don't think, I mean, any of you want to make enemies here between the editorial tagging and the semantic tagging, because I think one needs the other, and that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. The last one, which is it's fairly new, and I don't know if anybody is doing it yet. I mean, I know that I heard it specifically from a customer, but the idea was to analyze the manuscripts and to analyze, of course, what the peer reviewer had validated or reviewed before, and suggest the top 3 or top 5 reviewer for any given manuscript. So this could be very interesting as well. How do you sell this one internally? This one is an easy one, lower cost, improve the consistency. Consistency is something I did not mention, but it's a key part of the game as well. I mean, if you take the indexing process from many different reviewer, you'll have some discrepancy, right? If you automate this process, it becomes more predictable and more consistent. So the consistency is a good benefit as well. I mean, beside, of course, the cost savings and the better time to market. And then flexibility, scalability, this idea that overnight, if you change the taxonomy, or if you want, or if you acquire a new content set, I mean, you can enrich this content overnight using your own technology and using your own taxonomy. So I hope this was a good summary. This took me the other half of the flight, actually. And so the next part now is identifying the right technique. So this is quite ambitious as well, because I try to look at the different semantic techniques, I mean extraction techniques that you need to power those facets. Okay. So the first one is the term extraction. So when I say term extraction, it's a little bit simplistic. In reality, it's the extraction of the terms. In many cases, it's the extraction of the non-phrases. So I mean a group of terms with a specific meaning. And of course, the ranking of the terms. So if you have, I mean, a non-phrase usually has more weight, carries more weight than a single term. And if a non-phrase like, I don't know, fiscal cliff is mentioned 10 times in the first paragraph, it's more important than cliff, fiscal on its own, mentioned once in the bottom of the paragraph. So there is a bit more complexity than the term extraction, but let's for the intent of this specific slide here, call it terms extraction with the bells and whistles. And this you could use for content recommendation and content categorization. Content recommendation, it's really, you don't need a taxonomy for the content recommendation. I think that's key. I mean, one of the questions we get all the time from customers or potential customers is, okay, do I need a taxonomy? Do I need an ontology? Do I need a thesaurus? Do I need to turn my taxonomy into an ontology? Do I need to buy or build a taxonomy? What can I do without a taxonomy? So that's always a good discussion to have with a prospective customer. For this part here, you don't need a taxonomy, because I mean the system automatically derives the key terms, the key non-phrases from the document, and then you have two types of algorithm. The classification algorithm, categorization, this is machine learning, right? So it learns from the content which is already classified. It will compare the new content to the content already classified and assign the best category or categories to any given document. So the algorithm itself has some complexity to it, but in terms of information extraction, it's really based on a weighted vector of terms. Recommendation, same idea. It's a similarity algorithm which will compare the semantic fingerprint of one given article, which is seen by the reader, with the database or the content store of the other articles. Moving on, entity extraction. So this is the next level. If you had the extraction of entities, so two types of entities really. The first one, which we should define, are the named entities. So typically people, places, and things. There is a bit more to it, so it's usually people, places, and organization, company names, etc. But I mean, the idea is people, places, and things, and we call this named entities. You can use this for entity linking. If you look today on usatoday.com, USA Today / Michael Bloomberg, I mean, you have the entity page for Michael Bloomberg, and for many different other entities, in this case persons. But then the other entities are the entities from the taxonomy or the ontology, but I won't get into this right now. So I mean, for now, let's call it the taxonomy, which is really, I mean, an organized thesaurus, right, hierarchical. You can use this taxonomy to deploy what we call a skill cartridge, an instruction, I mean, a set of instruction of for the tagging, and then do the tagging from this taxonomy. So once you had the taxonomy, you can do the topic pages based on the taxonomic leaves, and you can do, of course, the faceted search. So when you do entity extraction, you can do more feature. And then finally, when you start to derive the relationship between the entities, that's what you need to build semantic networks, triple store with this RDF triples. That's where you can build more data-driven product or structured product, and knowledge bases, of course. So I mentioned the skill cartridge earlier. For each type of techniques that you want to apply, you have specific components, which we call skill cartridge. I mean, that's really our jargon, but it's quite easy to understand. In other words, it's an envelope of instruction that tells the engine what to extract from the content, in very simple words. So for term extraction, there is an off-the-shelf skill cartridge called the relevant topic finder, which does, I mean, exactly this, term extraction. For the entity extraction, the one in the middle is text mining 360, which identifies person, companies, location, etc. So that's for the name entity extraction. You can use, for example, in the media domain, they have a taxonomy called the IPTC, which we have as a standard skill cartridge, and which Gannett decided not to use. But then it's an example of an existing taxonomy that is, I mean, could be used to categorize some news. Skill cartridges to extract relationship. We have some in the biological domain, medical domain, chemical domain, and then some across the board. One for sentiment analysis, opinion mining. So here the relationship is between a product and a sentiment, negative or positive, of course. So very interesting, I mean, use of this type of technology. And CI is competitive intelligence. But of course, in any given publisher or media organization or society, you have your own assets, which have to be taken into account. So I listed 3 here, but maybe there's more. Corpus in the sense of annotated corpus. So corpus which have been enriched by humans over the years, and from which the system can learn. So for machine learning, I mean, the first question we would ask you, okay, do you have anything that has been tagged, and properly tagged, of course, because I mean the machine learning is very powerful, but you need to teach him with the right type of content. So tagged corpus or enriched corpus, very useful. Thesaurus, taxonomies, ontologies. I mean, this of course is very useful when you have them, because you can do a skill cartridge from them. And then the domain expert. In some cases, maybe there is no thesaurus, but you have some good domain experts, and we can work with them to define the extraction rules. So 3 different components. And it gets interesting when we combine the existing skill cartridges and then the enriched corpus to make the basic skill cartridge more relevant to your domain. And when we take thesaurus, taxonomies, and ontologies to turn them into specific skill cartridges. And of course, when we use the domain expert to curate, validate, enhance the quality of the tagging system itself. That's the big picture. I was already arrived in San Francisco when this one when this one was done. So we take questions at the end, right? Okay. All right, so the next one is how you stage your journey. So if we go back to the goals, I mean, let's keep the goals in mind. Then you look at the different techniques you can use: term extraction, entity extraction, and relationship. So of course, for each techniques, you can have a specific set of custom or off-the-shelf skill cartridges, the resources, the type corpuses, the taxonomies, and the subject matter experts. I mean, this gives you an idea of the cost, right? The technology itself, and then the internal cost as well. At the same time, and that's something we didn't touch upon yet, quality measures, right? I mean, you can do faceted search very easily, but if the quality of the taxonomy itself is not great, or if you have gaps in the taxonomy, or if the taxonomy is it's too specific and it's like 7 or 10 level deep, you can't really turn that right away into a faceted search experience. So I mean, there are some consideration as well of how to use the assets, and keep in mind the quality that you want to reach. So quality should be part of the discussion. And once you have that, using the metrics that I listed earlier, I mean, you have the benefits, right? You can measure them, predict. It's not an exact science, but you can come up with some good way to measure the success and the return on investment. You have the cost, and you can do the cost benefit analysis. And then, of course, you have this notion of, I mean, you can't think of semantic enrichment as a feature, right? It's a platform, which is an enabling technology for the publisher to derive many different features. So you need to think in terms of the low-hanging fruit. In many cases, we hear from customers that, for example, content recommendation, I mean, we know it's fairly easy to deploy. It's a must-have feature in many cases now. So content recommendation typically, as it does not require a very complex taxonomy and relies on only off-the-shelf component. Okay, that's a good example of a low-hanging fruit. It's easy to deploy in days or weeks. So once you have the priorities, you can do the staging of the project as well. I mean, you don't do all the features at once. I don't think I've seen that before. And of course, you start with the low-hanging fruits, and then you start, and then once you have that, you can build upon this, and you can do more features. But the key takeaway, I mean, really for today is it's not a feature. I mean, there is no, it's more than that. It's a platform, and then you can use it for many different reasons and benefits. So I have only some screenshots of use cases. I mean, it's not a live demonstration, so it will go fairly fast. I selected a few use cases. The first one is Springer Link, very well-known publishers, of course, and a customer of us in Germany. They have a new version of Springer Link. I don't know if you've seen it. Very nice design. And this is one example. I mean, in this case, you have an article from Acta Geophysica. You have the abstract. You have all those very interesting features, which are the look inside, the get access, etc. So I won't go into all those new features on Springer Link, but this one is interesting. If you click below here on related content, you have a list of similar content. So if you're not sure this is exactly the right article you want to look at, you have related content. Something very interesting that Springer did in this case, I mean, you know that they have books and journals. They chunk the books into chapters. So if you read one specific article, you can be recommended the reading of a book chapter and vice versa. So there is cross-selling opportunities for Springer and increased transactional revenue, promoting book chapters, which they sell by the unit, to the readers of journals. So the feature promotes really this cross-pollination of the content. Nature Publishing Group, which I think takes it one step further. So they have many different journals, but I took this one because I think the implementation in this one is very interesting. You have two highlighting tools here. I don't know if you see them. The genes and proteins and the compounds. So if you click here on the genes and proteins, you have a highlight of all the genes and proteins in the abstract or in the full text, if you have access to it. And then, so you can click here, of course, and you have this very good feature, which is very targeted for this specific audience. I mean, molecular biologists. You have the inside this article proteins, and you see, of course, that the MNL3 has been normalized to its full name. So there is a lot of normalization happening in the background here. I mean, there is an average 6 different names for a protein. Or a gene, you have the species here. Same tab for the genes and same one for the antibodies. So that's really a great reading help for the biologists. Before they get into the article, they know which genes are mentioned and which proteins are mentioned. If you mouse over a gene, in this case the FMNML3, you can view it in UniProt, interest gene, or a nature product, which is the Antibodypedia. So earlier I mentioned the fact that you could link to internal and external knowledge. I mean, they did both in this occasion. So it's very interesting because it's interest gene and UniProt, and then Antibodypedia is a new product from nature. So I show you the interest gene lookup. You have more information, of course, on this specific protein. Again, normalization is key here, because if you want to do a proper lookup on those database, I mean, you need to have a single identifier. And then I show you the one on Antibodypedia. For this specific protein, you have all the related antibodies. So you have the supplier, Novus Biological, they have 4 antibodies related, and then of course this is then this becomes an e-commerce website where nature drives revenue to providers of antibodies. So I think it takes the concept of semantic linking quite far. And this is a nature product, which has now a lot of exposure, right? Because you have access to it from the journals. Last example from nature. In this case, I mean, I think they started quite early. So I think they are at a stage where they have deployed most of the features we've mentioned today. In this case, they use the tagging generated by our product, by Luxit, to derive topic pages. So in this case, interferon at nature.com is a topic page with highlighted articles, specifically mentioning interferon with a high, I mean, the aboutness is very high. You have links to jobs and links to discussion forums as well in Nature Network. And of course, you have these ads here, PBL interferon sources. So this page is actually sponsored. It's always the same ad. And with the same content, because it is only the content from the journals. They have additional sponsorship revenue from a specific vendor. And also they provide to the biologists interested in interferon a very targeted product. So that's a landing page if you look at it from a search engine perspective, or that's a topic page if you look at it from a topical perspective. I'll skip this one. I mean, in this case, what you see here on the bottom are just the key tags which have been applied. So this is the nature ontology, and the system has applied the nature tags directly on the content. I have 2 more examples, which I think are mostly on related content, but I wanted to mention Sage Knowledge because it's a very interesting product, and we always speak a lot about the STM publishing, and this is a social science product. They've been enriching their content with us for a year or 2, and specifically on Sage Knowledge, you see the keywords here. So when you do a search on psychology, you see, for example, if you're interested in cultural psychology or positive psychology or political psychology, if you click here, you refine the search, and then you have the related documents here on the right-hand side. So a little bit like on Springer, but they try to promote the handbooks as well, so you have a good mix of books, chapters, handbooks, etc., which you can save in My Knowledge. I mean, there are more features on this website which are very interesting, but you can tell when you navigate on this website it's heavily enriched in terms of content. And the last one, brand new, I just heard about it recently. It's a customer in the UK, IOP Science, different domain as well because it's physics. I mean, they will, I guess, deploy more features, but right now you see this feature here, related article, new, very useful. They present up to 10 related article to the reader of a specific abstract. So it's one more example. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Guillaume, for that talk, for that great introduction, and showing us some excellent use cases. Do we have any couple of questions from the audience at this time? No questions. Well, I hope you're saving them up. Oh, just one.
Yeah, just a quick one. I have 2 but getting into a little detail. Thanks very much for the talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
And the presentation.
Thank you.
So, is there a way to measure the success of the tagging, if you like, of your content source? Mark a given content source as more accurately tagged than a different tagging source, and perhaps go to that first source first.
Yeah. When you say success, I mean quality, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, no, of course. I mean, you have this notion of comparing a tagged corpus to a corpus previously tagged manually, for example. So that's why you compare the automated approach with the manual approach, which is something that you have to do in many cases. Then if you are already into an automated approach and you make changes to the automation, you want to compare this new version of the tagging to the previous one. So yeah, you have, I mean, in our specific product, you have tools to measure the precision and recall of the tagging and compare with either a gold standard, which could be a manual one, or previous versions of the skill cartridge. But it's exactly how you do the quality assessment, which I mentioned, yeah. Thank you.
We have another question in the back.
Please.
I was wondering about taxonomy. I think you said that you don't need a taxonomy, but I was wondering, can you still use the service system if you have a taxonomy?
No, sorry. Maybe I confused. I was confusing myself. No, of course. No, what I said is that you don't absolutely need a taxonomy to get started. So if you don't have a taxonomy, you can still do content recommendation. You can do auto classification of content, and you can highlight some key terms. You can find some good tags which are not from a taxonomy. So yeah, you can do some things, but not everything. If you have a taxonomy, it's good news, right? I mean, it's more.
It's great news. Yeah,
it's great news.
Don't listen to him. You need a taxonomy, okay?
For faceted charts, you need a taxonomy. For the topic pages, I think having a taxonomy is very useful as well. So yeah, for you need a taxonomy if you want to take it to the next step. Yes.
And can I just add one thing on the question about measuring accuracy, because you kind of, there are tools, but you do it the old-fashioned way too, right? You're actually looking and seeing, okay, is this right? And it's the way we used to do precision and recall in the old library science world. But so there are tools to look at it, but it's always I go and look by hand too.
We have time for one or two more before our next speaker, I think, in the back. Yes, you.
Basically defining a downstream workflow. As once you have the content, needs some heuristics in the system to tag data. Have you thought about, anybody in the panel, moving it upstream as technology improves, where the author can assist in terms of the quality issue and percent correct tagging, any thinking in that instead of just down to the upstream work with the authors?
I'll take that question. We've actually thought about that at the IEEE and had many debates about putting a tool in the hands of authors, and what the success rate would be in first good responses, and came to the conclusion that if we got 50% of the authors doing that, what does that really save us? We still need to set up a workflow to do the tagging for the other 50%, so let's just run the first 50 through as well, and promote that as a service to authors, right? It's all about, with the open access movement today, publishers say we add value. I think this is a great value add that we can bring.
And I'll also say that at Silverchair, we are looking at integrating some of our taxonomy data into the peer manuscript review system, so that authors may be able to choose, from a set of keywords that are already defined, and also kind of help set up a feedback loop where if the authors have new kind of candidate terms that maybe aren't in the taxonomy, that could be sort of factored back in to help improve the accuracy and uncover new concepts, because that's where the domain experts really are.
And that's how we do it in the news too. We present the suggested auto tags. They're reviewed by editorial. They can be added to, subtracted, but that all has to be integrated into the content creation part of the workflow.
All right. Thank you very much for your questions.